Hello and thanks for joining me for your in-depth weekly horoscope for week commencing the 10th of January. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. As ever, I'll give you a broad overview before, please stay with me, I will dive deep and go into each individual zodiac sign to give you in forensic detail what you can expect for the next 7 days. Now, if you are new to my channel, I would be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Now, this week begins with an event which actually happened late last week, still very much to the fore, and that's a quarter moon between the Sun and the Moon. The Moon on Sunday was in the sign of Aries, the Sun in the sign of Capricorn. Aries is the first house, the first zodiac sign. It's very much to do with action and energy and impulse. And the moon in this location can be quite restless, whereas the Sun in the sign of Capricorn is much more about how the established order works. So if we want to try something a bit more individual this week, we have to be mindful of how it will be received. Now, also this week, from Monday through to Wednesday, the Sun is forging a beautiful link with Neptune. If you are someone who has a strong compassion for those who are less fortunate, this is really going to emphasize that part of your nature. This could see you making a donation to a good cause, or perhaps doing something just in a practical way. You know, keeping an eye on an elderly neighbour, or perhaps if someone's got COVID, going and doing a bit of shopping for them, putting it on their doorstep just to give them some assistance. The Sun in the sign of Capricorn can be about status and more material gains. Neptune in Pisces is much more spiritual. So it's like trying to find a union between the two when they're in this sextile. But in the second half of this week, the Sun comes in to a conjunction with Pluto. Now, by Sunday, this becomes absolutely exact. This is very much to do with transformations. Pluto is the planet of change, but it can also be the planet of endings. So if there's something in our situation that needs to make way, then this particular influence is going to call out to us. Now, it could be an old lifestyle approach. It may be a job that we're not enjoying very much. Perhaps it is that relationship which has seen better days and been bumping along the bottom. But that transformation that can go on between the Sun and Pluto can also be within ourselves. So we can change and our relationship to situations alter quite deeply. Now, of course, on Friday, Mercury finally goes into its retrograde. It's actually been in its pre-shadow period since the last 3 days of last year. So if something has been meandering along and not quite gaining the traction that you've been hoping for, this could explain it. But also this week, Mars is in an aggravating angle with Neptune. So Mars is very much about passion, action, desire. Neptune can dissolve, so sometimes our motives can be a bit unclear when these two are not communicating clearly. So with Mercury also in a retrograde in the sector of friendships and group associations and how we connect to others, I think it's going to be important if something or somebody seems a little bit different or not quite clear in where they're coming from, not to jump to a conclusion, because the potential for confusion is definitely there later in this week. But if we can stay clear-minded and clear in our actions, some kind of change can happen in our situations which actually can be very positive, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time, which often can be the case with Pluto. Now, before I go on to tell you about each of the 12 zodiac signs, year 2022 is with us. If you want to order your forecast and get my special package of your character analysis as well, from the time of the order, I will give you 12 full months. plus 30% off. But all this is based on your unique birth data, not just your sun sign, and can give you searing insights of what you can expect in the months ahead, and also discover what makes you tick at a much deeper level. Please see the link beneath this video. Hello Aquarius, and welcome to your in-depth forecast for week commencing the 10th of January. Now, as this week begins, so the power of last week's lunation, the quarter moon, is still much to the fore. That suggests that some gossip could be doing the rounds, but it may not necessarily be gossip that's anything to do with you. We all know that whether it's through that big social media platform, or it's through Twitter, or just text messages or emails that we tune into, that there's a lot of white noise. And I think the square between the sun and the moon is saying to you, make sure that you don't get swamped with that white noise. Also, Mars is in a fantastic location for you in terms of setting your future sights. But if there's a financial implication on what you're trying to do, be aware that its square with Neptune can confuse and distort. So if you are talking to someone about a funding proposition, for example, or you're planning a small enterprise, be very clear-minded, particularly with Mercury in your sign going retrograde on Friday. But remember, a retrograde can be an opportunity. Do not see it only through the guise of negativity. But it does suggest that if you want to inch forwards at the moment, you need to be very conscious of the emotional dimension, because the Sun forges a very fine link to Neptune at the start of this week, which means that part of your nature, which is often very attuned to good causes, people who are less well off or less well positioned in life than you are, means that you could do something significantly generous or thoughtful, and that's fantastic. But Neptune's square with Mars, that creates the distortion. And then later this week, the Sun comes into an exact conjunction with Pluto on Sunday. Now, over the last few years, rather like Libran people, it has been a very psychological time. If you're a Libra in some ways, moon, ascendant, but you have the Sun, some other planets in Aquarius, you'll be even more acutely aware of how challenging this is being. I think the Sun's conjunction with Pluto will have taught you and me just how far we've come. The 12th house is where we understand the deep psychology of ourselves, of others, their motives. What is the real triggers? And there may be something that needs to make way in your situation and mine. And it may be a painful transition. There's probably been painful transitions plenty over the last few years. But the other thing this conjunction can do is show just how far you've come in clearing out the dead wood in your situation. And although you're planting something that's quite deep and personal and perhaps not on view to others in a particularly prominent way at the moment, once the Sun moves into your sign on the 20th, you will be ready to spring forwards in a much more meaningful way. But it is important to combine with the logic, the air of being an Aquarius, the more spiritual, psychological dimension that's become much clearer and more obvious in recent times.